Hi everyone. This presentation was prepared by Kayla Walls, a master's student at Iowa State University. My project is titled Understanding Parent Influences on Youth Decisions to Enter Agricultural Grain Storage Facilities, and my major professor is Dr. Gretchen Mosher. Agriculture is consistently one of the most hazardous industries. Many agricultural injuries and deaths are attributed to confined spaces, or a workplace that was not intended to be a regularly inhabited workstation due to the restricted entry and exit points and the potential physical or toxic hazards. An example of an agricultural confined space is a grain bin, which poses both grain entrapment and engulfment hazards. Grain entrapment is a partial submersion in grain where the victim's head remains visible above the line of grain, whereas engulfment is where the victim's whole body is submerged in grain. There are approximately 30 recorded grain entrapment cases each year, although this number is actually estimated to be much higher due to lack of consistent reporting. Approximately 50% of the reported cases are fatal. When entrapped in grain, both environmental and physiological factors play a large role in victims' survivability. Environmental factors include depth of entrapment, position of the body, and grain pressure, weight, and temperature. Physiological factors include the victim's age, physical condition, oxygen consumption, blood flow, and heart rate. It is evident that grain entrapment is taxing on the body of an adult, and therefore it is expected the effects are even more harsh on youth victims. Youth are generally more susceptible to injury due to their smaller size, less strength, and lack of maturity and experience. In 2012 alone, there were over 14,000 recorded injuries of youth living on, working on, or visiting U.S. farms. Historically, 1 in 5 recorded grain entrapment cases involved a youth under 21 years old. In 2018, these numbers sharply increased as 1 in 3 recorded grain entrapment cases involved a youth under 21. Most youth cases occur on OSHA-exempt sites, such as family farms, in the Midwestern United States. Many OSHA-exempt sites where youth are working include the youth's parent serving as their direct supervisor. It is hypothesized that the approach parents take to supervision of hazardous tasks plays a large role in youth safety outcomes on family farms. Understanding why youth enter hazardous situations and end up entrapped or engulfed in grain is the primary goal of the research. Farming is a family affair. Parents love to include their youth in farm work and feel as if it builds a certain level of responsibility. Parents often use age and gender to determine the level of responsibilities that their youth should have on the farm. For example, when a youth turns 1 year older, a parent may assign them additional responsibilities that the youth previously did not have. Because parents are including their children in agricultural work, parents also must be the primary teacher of safety-related information to their children. Farm parents believe that it is their responsibility to make the farm environment as safe as possible for their youth, but they feel unable to protect them in every way. However, research has shown that some parents think that safety conversations can be overlooked and that safety is just common sense. Youth have limited life experience, and it is more difficult for them to understand risks due to their lower levels of cognition. Farm parents often begin assigning farm responsibilities while their children are in the pre-operational or concrete operational stages. Until youth reach the formal operational stage, however, they are incapable of reasoning or abstract thinking. It is argued that until youth reach adulthood at 18 years, their decision-making is not adequate in potentially hazardous situations, such as grain entrapment. To complete this project, we first developed a decision-making survey instrument based on various real-world situations involving grain bins. Students identified which course of action they would take if they were presented with this scenario in real life. The instrument was validated by 10 agricultural safety professionals across the United States, some of whom have university affiliations and others who have grain industry experience. The survey was distributed to all students in the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences at Iowa State University who were enrolled in the following departments: Agricultural and Biosystems Engineering, Agricultural Education and Studies, Agronomy, Animal Science, Economics, and Horticulture. To participate in the survey, students also had to self-identify as having had prior experience inside grain bins while under the age of 18. To gain further insight, 10 willing students were selected for follow-up interviews. Finally, both the quantitative and qualitative data were analyzed to determine which factors played the largest role in youth's decisions to enter grain bins. The initial contact was made through email to 2,687 Iowa State students in early March 2020. There were 229 recorded responses, 206 of which identified to have had grain bin experience while under the age of 18, and 169 of which completely finished the survey. Of those who finished the survey, there were 113 males and 56 females, ranging in age from 18 to 24, with one 33-year-old. Over 95% of survey respondents were from one of the following states: Iowa, Illinois, Wisconsin, and Minnesota. As before mentioned, the survey presented students with 3 real-world grain bin scenarios. In scenario 1, the youth was unloading a grain bin with their parent when they came across a blockage of bad grain. The parent asked the youth to enter the top of the bin to break up the obstruction while the parent supervised the running auger. The students had 4 options to choose from. 56% of respondents said they would use a pole to break up the blockage from outside the bin. 22% would tell their parent it is dangerous to enter the bin in this situation. The second scenario tests productivity versus safety. A neighbor is supposed to come over to help the youth unload a grain bin. There is a time crunch as the load needs to be taken in by the end of the workday. The youth thinks about entering the bin to walk down the corn, potentially speeding up the unload. In this scenario, 45% of respondents would patiently wait for the grain to unload, while 18% would enter the bin to walk down the corn. In the last scenario, a youth is working with a sibling of the same gender and a similar age. They discover moldy cord caked alongside the bin as they are unloading it. The sibling offers to enter the bin to break up the obstruction with a shovel and asks the youth to turn off the auger, enter the bin, and help them break up the obstruction. 37% of respondents would communicate the possibility of avalanched grain to their sibling, and 35% would be on the outside of the bin to try and break up the blockage. 18% of students would enter the bin in this situation. Following the 3 scenarios, students were then asked to rank the factors which affected their decision-making. The factors to be ranked depended on which scenario they were relevant to. The factors were personal safety, hazard level of the task, likelihood of engulfment, productivity, and either parental pressure and authority or sibling and peer pressure. In all 3 scenarios, most students kept personal safety as their highest priority or the most important factor, and either productivity, parental authority and pressure, or sibling and peer pressure as their lowest priority or the least important factor. At the end of the survey, students could indicate their interest in participating in a follow-up interview. 10 students were selected, all of which claimed to have been inside grain bins over 20 times. Students also indicated that their parents either always or most of the time served as their supervisor as they completed agricultural work. When asked under what conditions students would follow the direction of their parent, even if they knew the situation was unsafe, most students said that they would first look for alternative options. One student said, "I wouldn't be blatantly disobedient to my parents, but I also don't think that they would tell me to do something that they didn't see themselves doing." Most students conveyed a true trust for their parents and think they lead by example. One interviewee said, "I trust my dad a lot, and I know that he would always put himself more at risk than me." Some students would even openly refuse to follow their parents' directions if they knew the situation was unsafe. As indicated by one student's response, "If it's too dangerous to enter the bin and dad's yelling at me to go enter the bin, I would be like, no, I'm not going in there." When asked about where they learned most of their farm safety knowledge from, most students attributed it to their parents, FFA, and 4 H, farm safety days, or personal experiences. One interviewee remembers, "We had a really good family friend that lost her leg in a grain bin accident, so that had always been a real big driver for any sort of farm safety around my home." As a result from this study, we discovered that most students surveyed chose the safe option on the decision-making scenarios. Additionally, most students valued their personal safety when choosing a course of action, and they kept parental authority and pressure, sibling and peer pressure, and productivity in low regard. Most students attributed their farm safety knowledge to their parents or personal experiences, but they also gave credit to FFA, 4 H, and farm safety days throughout school. Finally, most students believe that their parents would not ask them to do anything dangerous or anything that their parents themselves would not do. In conclusion, what is learned at home, safety-wise, is important in keeping families together. It is our hope that this project can play a part in saving the lives of youth in agriculture and help keep farm families whole. Thank you so much for listening to this presentation. Any questions can be directed to my email, kwalls@iastate.edu. Thank you.